The Fantasy Fullback Dive is back with part 2 of our 3-part series here with Ian Hartitz of Rotoworld. We're looking at the offseason risers and fallers. Nobody better to do it with than my man Hartitz over here. How are you, brother?
Doing good, man. Finally, the weather's getting pretty nice here, and it's just leading the way to some of that fall coming back and that good old football. So I'm pumped. We're full on grind mode after the draft, after free agency, and finding these sleepers each and every day. So let's get at it.
Absolutely, man. And in the winter hat, it might be tough to tell that we're getting these 70-degree days. I know we were just talking over here. Cannot wait for that first quarantine haircut finally, man. Oh, my God.
I'm always just a buzz cut guy, too. I don't ask for much, but all the buzzers and clippers are months beyond. So, I got to rock the thinking hat for now, but it's all good.
Absolutely, man. So if you missed part 1 for our listeners, we recapped already, me and Ian, the QB risers and fallers. You can find that episode and really any of the show notes over at ffbdpod.com. You can go to our homepage as well, rotostreetjournal.com. And also, Ian also gave a great, preview to that by giving us, his overall process, the stats, the tools he loves to use, kind of what separates him from the rest of the industry. So if you haven't heard that and you want to know more about Ian, you got to turn into the last episode. It was fantastic. Today, we're going to dive into the part 2, like I said. This is going to be focused on the pass catchers who have risen and fallen this offseason. Like last week, we kind of discussed volume's key for fantasy success. Doesn't matter how good you are if you're not touching the ball. So, of course, targets are the premium to track for wide receivers, but also more so than other positions, in my opinion at least, they are dependent on that surrounding talent aspect, because if you have trash throwing you the ball, we obviously saw what Brock Osweiler did that one year to Hopkins, which I will never forgive him for. But it does matter where that volume's coming from as well. So we have a few more factors to consider with this position, and that's why it's so important to look at them all as we go. So with all those factors in mind, with all that being said, let's dive right in. Who do you consider the single biggest wide receiver or tight end offseason riser of this offseason, Ian?
Right now, the guy I can't get away from is just Adam Thielen. I think there's a pretty clear-cut top 5 wide receivers right now. You have your Michael Thomas, Devonte Adams, Tyreek Hill. I'm losing it. Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones, and DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think anyone's going to fight you with those as your top 5. But after that, we have a whole lot of questions, and I just think the questions we're asking for Thielen are more silly than not. We're labeling the guy injury-prone now after he missed 6 games last year. Did not miss a single game from 2014 to 2018. And hamstring injuries aren't great, but when the guy already came back from the injury in the same season and went for about 180 yards in 2 games against the Saints and the 49ers in the playoffs, no, I'm not worried about Thielen operating at full health going into next year. They're concerned about, how's he going to do without Diggs paving the way, and how's he going to do, in a run-first offense. I just think they're a little bit misguided because, again, this is not a one-year boom thing from Thielen. We've seen this guy operate as a true top 10 to 15 real-life wide receiver, I think, over these last 3 or 4 seasons. Gary Kubiak's run-first offense, and last year only Stefon Diggs only had 94 targets. Before that, though, his wide receiver one, including that year, has averaged 138 targets per season. The Andre Johnsons, Rod Smiths, Ravens Steve Smith, Demaryius Thomas with the Broncos. Gary Kubiak is no stranger to enabling a real high-end wide receiver one. We have the biggest threat to Thielen's targets leaving town. We have a perfectly good quarterback in Kirk Cousins throwing the ball. And we have all the reason to believe with how the Vikings kind of defense and team is looking that they might even take a step back and just be forced to throw the ball more anyway. So I'm Thielen as my clear-cut wide receiver 6 right now.
I love that. That's pretty bold, especially compared to where he's going. I think right now he's ranked as the wide receiver 16, which is, I love it though. I'm all about it. He's been 6th in PPR points per game in his last 40 healthy games, 6th in yards, 7th in receptions over that span. So, he has been straight up crushing it. And even last year, before he went down, he was crushing it yet again. He's been a top 10 wide receiver every single, so he's wide receiver 5 2 seasons ago, wide receiver 9 the year prior. And then before going down, he was still the top guy, wide receiver 9 in points per game, 6 TDs in 6 games. He is crushing it. He always has. And I love that you point out, not injury prone. Why are we starting to label it? It's been 1 season with a hamstring pull. Let's get over it. This guy has great ironclad chemistry. The volume's going to be there, as you highlighted with that Kubiak stat. I'm fully with you. I think I have him at 8 or 9, not quite as high as you, but it's right up there. Clear wide receiver 1 that falls to round 4. I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. And I don't get why anyone's just overlooking this guy as one of the biggest offseason risers. So I love it. You mentioned one of the guys you have above him, and I don't know if we can consider him a riser just because he's already been viewed so highly. He's already performed so highly. That's DeAndre Hopkins, of course, but he's now in a new uniform with a new quarterback for the first time in his career. What do you think of his value? Did you look at him any higher, lower, the same in Arizona? Do you think there's any room for upside? What do you think here with DeAndre Hopkins?
I think it's a little bit lower. I mean, if he was still in Houston, I think you could potentially talk about him as the overall wide receiver 1 or 2 or 3. But I think now he is in that 5 spot because, look, we all saw what happened with OBJ last season. I mean, changing environment. We cannot assume that a wide receiver that's been around is just going to continue that elite production, especially when it is someone like OBJ and Hopkins who, Nuke has the most targets in the entire league of anyone over the last 3 seasons. And we can't guarantee he's going to be getting those same targets in Arizona. I mean, the troubling thing is like the reason why we were so high on Beckham was the perceived quarterback upgrade from Eli to Baker Mayfield. Now, I mean, Deshaun Watson to Kyler, that's a downgrade. I love both quarterbacks. I think Kyler could eventually be better. Maybe he takes a huge step forward, but I mean, he didn't have all the weapons he needed as a rookie, but he was, by most statistics, outside the top 20 in a whole lot of throwing metrics as a rookie. So adding someone like Hopkins is going to help, but we just have a lot of questions here. Is Kyler going to be as good as Deshaun? Is Hopkins going to see the 150-plus targets he deserves? Is he going to, be able to operate with Fitz and Kirk probably stealing some targets? So I think he's still good enough that we need to treat him as a locked-in wide receiver 1. But no, I think there are good enough reasons now to go with your Michael Thomas, Devonte Adams, Tyreek Hill's the world before him.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense just because of all these new question marks that are raised. The one thing I do love is coming to Arizona, no team targeted wide receivers more than the Cardinals, 69.8%. So, it seems like there's nowhere to go but down for his volume, but I'm hoping it's just not too much down because of this propensity. And I love this idea of the air raid just blowing up in year 2, Kyler blowing up. Obviously, it's a big what if, but if it does, I mean, he could spike in those TD departments because they do love to throw in the red zone so much. So I'm with you. He's my 5. He definitely took a little bit of a hit, but it's still Hopkins, maybe the best talent at the position in the game. I'm so excited to see how Kingsbury and Kyler and all this meshes. So as you said, though, there's really nowhere to go other than a little bit down. Other than him, there's certainly some risers we got to consider, and then we'll talk about some other fallers. And to me, a big question is what's going to happen in LA with the Rams now with just Kupp. You got Cooks gone, and now it's just Kupp, Woods. You got Higbee there as well, maybe seeing a spike. Which of those guys, if any, are you targeting? Who do you think benefits the most? How do you see this all playing out?
Trying to figure out the Rams' offense is, for once, tough because last couple seasons we've had just locked in. They ran 3 wide receiver formations, boarding pretty much anyone, Gurley, bell cow, and we had Everett and Higbee pretty much splitting snaps enough that you couldn't really use either of them. Now it's a mess, and we've seen these guys all produce at different times. My best guess for what we see is we see Woods and Kupp, full-time wide receivers. And I think Higbee is a full-time player in his offense as well. We're going to have some type of committee with their 3 backs. And then I think we see, because McVay has talked about wanting to not be in such, heavy 11 personnel all the single time, just one running back, 1 tight end. So I think having Reynolds, having Van Jefferson, having Gerald Everett also still there, I just think we're going to see them more rotate that number 3 wide receiver position instead of making sure one of Reynolds or Van Jefferson is on the field at all times. So with that said, Higbee, he's just already kind of being priced. I guess if we want to say his ceiling is 16 games of what he was doing over the last 5 weeks, then he'd be the greatest tight end ever. But even if we're just reasonable about it and say, okay, he can be a reasonable tight end 1, he's being priced at that ceiling right now. So is Kupp. I think that makes Woods the guy to go get from this group. I mean, the floor is wild already, even without this expected, nice little boom in target share. Only Hopkins, Julio, Kelsey, Keenan, Michael Thomas, Kittle, Devonte Adams have more games with 5+ receptions and 50+ yards over these last 2 seasons. He has a great floor. I mean, the dude is averaging 18 rush attempts per season and over 130 targets. I mean, it's enough rushing volume that we actually got to pay attention to it. And, looking at these this wide receiver 2 range, I find myself taking running backs in the early rounds of drafts. But, man, if Woods falls a little bit and you can get him after going heavy with the running backs, you have an awesome floor.
Yeah, I love that one. It's such a great, just overall strategy point, too, is to not buy players at the ceiling and to look for those guys that are getting discounted and that you can bake some upside into the price that you're getting them at with Robert Woods. So to me, yeah, he definitely presents as maybe the best value. The one thing I loved that I saw out of Higbee, I mean, so you talk about the greatest tight end ever. If he did have a full season pace of what he did, it would be 180 targets, which is just insane. 1664 yards and 7 TDs with 138 receptions. So of course we know that's not going to happen, but I love just thinking of the 16 game pace of how ridiculous that was. But part of why that was happening, yes, Everett was out, but they also went to a lot more 2 tight end, 12 personnel. You mentioned the 11 personnel was just that locked in for a couple years. They went to that so much more down the stretch. 2 of their really biggest wins of the year against Seattle down the stretch, they were 71% 2 tight end sets, and that kind of facilitated that blowing up procedure for Higbee. So if this kind of move signals just an overall philosophy and overall formation shift, then maybe, just maybe, Higbee will have that ridiculous like 23-18, 23-19, 22 pace. No, of course not. But if they do go 2 tight end for all the season, maybe there is that ceiling where it is there too. So that's the other guy I really like to highlight. Kupp's the one I kind of see myself avoiding a little bit right now, but not even avoiding. If he's there, he's there. There's just other guy like Thielen's off in there where Kupp's going. So I'm with you there. Like, give me Thielen all day instead of him. What about Cooks himself, the guy that departs here, now becoming more of a clear number 1 potentially with the Texans? Do you like the fit? What do you see of Brandon Cooks there?
So the Texans and Giants are both kind of interesting offenses because we have a whole lot of uncertainty, but a whole lot of talent in these passing games, especially the Texans that should be, pretty productive. I mean, okay, not having Hopkins isn't great. I know Watson's splits with and without Fuller have just fallen off a cliff over these past years. So if you take away Hopkins, what's going to happen? But I don't know, because he has always just been he's had so few weapons over these years. I mean, there were situations like where Fuller got hurt and it was, who's he going to throw to other than Hopkins? So if these guys can stay even just a little bit healthy, and we have Deshaun Watson throwing to Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, Kenny Stills, Duke, and David Johnson, that's a lot of talent. I think Watson's good enough to do a lot with that. And so looking at these kind of average draft positions, you got to kind of look at best ball. I mean, I know they're going to be different than redraft, but there's just more best ball going on right now than redraft stuff. So looking at the best ball, I mean, all these guys are going, wide receiver 35 and later pretty much. So they're being priced as wide receiver 3s to wide receiver 4s, which, they very well could be. But they're being priced with a bunch of other guys, like your Christian Kirks of the world, that we know are wide receiver 3s and wide receiver 4s. And, it wouldn't shock me if Brandon Cooks or if Will Fuller or if Darius Slayton or if, Sterling Shepard, if one of these guys in a crowded, unclear pecking order just rises to the top. So, if we're really just zeroing out an upside, I think these Texans wide receivers where they're being valued right now, like, heck yeah, take a shot. Because, again, the more drafts everyone does, I think we're going to realize that you need to load up on RBs this year. So if you have these later wide receivers, that's why I like Jamison Crowder, Terry McLaurin. I'm sure we'll talk about them later.
Yep.
But any wide receiver that's being priced this low that has an actual shot to be the team's wide receiver 1, like, take a long look at them.
And especially the wide receivers that are the number 1 to, you just mentioned Deshaun Watson, such a great talent. Ridiculous player last year. I know we referenced this on last episode when we were talking about QBs. 5th in deep yardage last year, 2nd in TDs with 11, and their number 1 PFF adjusted deep completion, 51.1% or 54.1%. So, I mean, this guy slings the ball. Obviously, if you just watch him play, he can sling it deep, but there's the advanced analytics that back that up. And you look at Cooks, Fuller as well, both incredible field stretchers. I mean, Cooks had 1,000 yards in 4 straight years before last year's kind of debacle where everything got thrown off. 14.8 yards per catch since 2015's 4th among receivers in that span. He had over 15 yards per catch in 3 of those 4. I mean, the guy can clearly burn. We all can just watch him play without the metrics. To me, that might just be the beautiful marriage of a great deep ball thrower and a great deep threat. And there's other guys to draw attention away from him too. So it's not like you can just put someone over Cooks the entire time. I really like this. He's probably my favorite single value right now at wide receiver. Like you said, getting priced as a wide receiver 3 as the potential number 1. And he's not Hopkins, but you mentioned nobody has more targets over the last 3 years than the number 1 wide receiver for the Texans. Clearly, they're different builds, but maybe he does, Bill O'Brien love just a clear-cut number 1. And if anybody on this group is going to be it, to me, that would be Cooks. So tons of upside at a bare minimum price. I love the Brandon Cooks move here for his own value. One kind of gross passing core, at least when you first look at it, is the Dolphins. But man, they kind of lit it up sneakily towards the later stretch of the year. Ryan Fitzpatrick was actually the number 4 quarterback in fantasy football from week 7 on once he took over the gig, which just blows. Every time I say that, I don't know what the fuck am I saying, but it's actually true. And Devontae Parker was obviously somebody that lit it up during that stretch. You see tons of love out there for Mike Gesicki, and also Preston Williams was pretty impressive before going down. They also had nobody this offseason, so to me, look at volume and people that looked like they were going to have a depth chart shakeup. There's nothing going on there. It's all still the same. What do you make of this core? Do you think we see another solid season out of them, or is that just kind of a late season flash in the pan from Fitzmagic himself?
Yeah, really weird offseason for the Dolphins. I thought they'd add like a high-end running back. We come away with Matt Breida and Jordan Howard. They didn't, kind of bringing back Albert Wilson, Alan Hearns, just to kind of. And none of these guys are bad per se. I don't hate the shakeup, but if there's anything they could have done, it was fix. What was probably easily the league's worst offensive line. They just didn't do a great job with that. So I'm hesitant in treating this Dolphins offense like it's one of these other, teams, Kansas City or someone that we just want to take. Anyone's going to be on the field because it might not be all that good of an offense. It took them that long to be good last season. Even when they were humming, it was more or less just Fitzpatrick throwing jump balls up to Parker and, Mike Gesicki out of the slot. Gesicki had wild splits with and without Preston Williams. So did Devontae Parker. I mean, Preston was maybe the best receiver on that team before he got hurt. I mean, he was showing out. I know he's undrafted and all that, but just from the preseason to the first 5-6 weeks or however long until he got hurt, the dude was playing really well. So, I mean, Parker and Gesicki aren't like, I think they're like Parker's like a mid-range wide receiver 20 right now. Gesicki's kind of going that tight end 1 borderline. So, they're both really talented guys. If Tua comes in, steps up, they could be the top 2 pass game options and definitely clear those values, no problem. But there's just some uncertainty there. I'm not going out of my way for them. Preston's the value because he's going wide receiver 50 range. And again, it just wouldn't be that shocking with the new quarterback and a new offense if Preston ends up being that guy. I mean, we have these situations every year where, the ADPs get closer and closer leading up to drafts. Last year it was DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. By the time the draft started, they were more or less interchangeable. I think that could be what we're seeing here with Parker and Preston.
Yeah, it totally could end up that way. And the one thing I do love that could allow that to be, both of them interchangeable, but also both very good. And you mentioned Preston Williams, obviously the value there because of the price, but why Parker might still be able to get it done after so many years of being so useless and such a, oh my fucking God, I can't, there's somebody I hate more than anybody. The one year I don't actually take the leap is the year he blows up. But Chan Gailey's spread attack, I mean, he's, Eric Decker and Brandon, what the hell is the guy's freaking name? Who am I thinking of? Brandon Marshall. Yeah, I mean, they both lit it up like top 10 wide receivers in that offensive scheme for multiple seasons because of so much passing game volume that was Ryan Fitzpatrick also at QB, just letting those big bodies go up and do their thing. If he's starting, I almost consider it a positive as long as he's lasting. Because once he took over as the starting quarterback, Josh Rosen was kind of getting mixed in and up until week 6. After week 6, only Michael Thomas had more points than Devontae Parker in fantasy football. I just found that stat out as I was coming on the air with you. I was like trying to do the metrics. Pretty wild to think that because Fitzpatrick there was some of these catches were just insane. Every single time it seemed like a jump ball, and the guy was just Stephon Gilmore. He was doing it over. It's, some of the best corners in the league. So I loved that stat to see. As long as Fitzpatrick is still thrown to him, I kind of like the fact that he's a top 20 only price after going wide receiver 11 in PPR leagues, and again the second best wide receiver from week 7 on. And Mike Gesicki too. But then again, the other point you brought up is huge. Is Preston Williams was also out for that. So how does that shake everything up? But Mike Gesicki did move into the slot for 76% of his snaps. He averaged 7.4 targets per game and scored 5 touchdowns over the last 7 games. He really started to light it up, was the tight end 5 in that span too. So it's just a matter of how much was that Preston Williams. But the Chan Gailey attack should give us some aerial pie at least to keep feeding him. So I'm intrigued. I'm sneaky intrigued. Not the Chiefs like you mentioned, but still an intriguing offense. Another gross offense that could yield at least one intriguing product. That's Terry McLaurin. I know you've always been a big fan of this guy. And the team, they rumored to go after Amari Cooper, but ultimately they yield no one. They don't draft anybody other than Antonio Gibson, which is a much different position or player type of player. So he's one of the most popular McLaurin candidates for a year 2 leap. What do you think, Ian?
like, yeah, it's going to be a leap, I think, if he could get 16 games, but
Yeah.
he already left pretty much. I mean, this guy was awesome last year. He just had a top 10 season among any rookie wide receiver we've had in the last decade, just in terms of yards per target. And it's like people look back at this season and go, oh, well, he was a world beater with Case Keenum under center, but he couldn't quite be that good when Dwayne Haskins came in. Like, first of all, the fact anyone is that good with Case Keenum under center should be viewed as a massive positive.
Absolutely.
And two, like, okay, it was rough in the kind of that middle portion of the season for a week or two, but Haskins and McLaurin figured it out at the end. I mean, last 3 games, McLaurin went 4 catches, 57 yards, touchdown. 5 catches, 130 yards, touchdown. 7 catches, 86 yards, no touchdown. I mean, he was performing as a legit wide receiver 1, just like we saw him do with Case Keenum at the end of the season. And look, he finished the year as like the PPR 28 or 20 wide receiver 28, 29 total, and he was a little better with Keenum, obviously over Haskins. But even with Haskins, he was in that wide receiver 30 range, and that's where he's being drafted right now. I mean, There's plenty of reason to believe both Haskins and McLaurin take second-year leaps like plenty of players do. There's no competition for them, and they have each other. I mean, so many of these wide receivers, like, your T.Y. Hiltons of the world and guys like that, we're just making jumps based on kind of what we've seen from them over the last half decade, and like with a new QB, this could be great. Take the second-year baller that still has his same QB under center who he's been catching passes from for years now. Antonio Gibson might be the number 2 projected target guy in that offense, which is ridiculous, and it's more just a testament to how sparse it is. I like Steven Sims, but as you said, like Gibson, they don't have anyone else in this offense that's even a threat to McLaurin, and the fact he's going out off the board so late is incredible. I have him as my wide receiver 18, and again, if you're doing what you're doing in these drafts, which I think a lot of people are going to lean towards, and you're going running back heavy early, unless you can get like Devonte Adams stud or something, focus on someone like McLaurin in that round 5, round 6 range, and I think he's giving you your best chance there of getting a true wide receiver 1.
Absolutely. I think the key, as you mentioned, is what if Haskins also takes a leap? Because even if he doesn't, we've seen him get it done. But what if he does take another step forward, as a lot of these offseason reports are suggesting he's really working it and putting in that serious work that seemed to be lacking for a good amount of last year. So he's already a baller, and he could only be that much better. Where do you kind of stack him up in that sophomore class? Is so exciting for redraft, for Dynasty. Where does he kind of stack up for you among the DKs and them all, the A.J. Browns, the Debos? Like, it's such a ridiculous class. Is he towards the top, or is he behind some of those other talents for you?
I think in terms of pure wide receiver talent, I might only put him behind A.J. Brown. The problem is DK Metcalf comes with Russell Wilson, and then obviously we're getting the Shanahan scheme over there with Debo. So they're all just incredible, man. Like, seriously, I mentioned before, McLaurin was in that top 10 kind of target, like rookie wide receivers and yards per target group. Well, A.J. Brown's there. DK Metcalf barely on the outside looking in. Debo Samuel's there. I mean, all 4 of these second-year guys, like, we're kind of, I think, nitpicking them. It's almost like maybe McLaurin, because he might be 4th out of that group, is on the outside looking in. But we just got to accept all 4 of these guys are awesome.
Yeah, they really are ridiculous. It's tough to kind of sift through them. You mentioned earlier, too, Jamison Crowder, a potential target hog that no one's looking for. That's one of my favorite things in drafts, is to find like what I call unsexy upside. It's, nobody wants him. You're not getting the oohs and ahs on draft day when you take Jamison Crowder, and especially for auction drafts. I mean, he's probably going to go for $1 or $2, and he could be a legit alpha. I mean, they bring in Mims. Yeah, he's solid. They bring in Perriman. Sure, he's decent, but to me it seems like Crowder and not a whole lot other than guys that are stretching the field for him. But what do you think of this guy? What do you think of the Jets passing attack next year?
So yeah, I think at running backs, the latest you can wait to get like a bell cow starter is David Montgomery. I think Crowder is that guy for wide receivers. He just led this team in every receiving category last year, and Robbie Anderson, who was like the only guy who had really just shown kind of number 1 qualities and chemistry with Sam Darnold, you replaced him with Brashad Perryman, who, hey, you know what? Brashad has played very good football the last 2 seasons. But, I mean, come on. I don't think we need to expect him to do much more than Robbie did last year. If Robbie couldn't take that next step, I don't think Brashad is going to come and step in and do it. And, yeah, nothing against Mims, but, with every rookie wide receiver this year, just with the lack of training camp reps we're probably going to have, and just, learning a new offense, not even to mention like Adam Gase, you really think he's going to be the type of guy to just throw the playbook at a rookie wide receiver and just feature him from day one? I don't think so. I mean, this is why Chris Herndon's a good value too. This Jets offense didn't add anyone. And I know Sam Darnold hasn't been great, but I hear people saying like, oh, just don't even draft these like football players on bad teams. And it's just not that easy because it's being so heavily valued into their draft positions that, Jamison Crowder or Chris Herndon, their values because they're so cheap. And if we can get 120 targets from a guy in the 8th or 9th round, that's better than taking a better real life player on a better team, just because, again, we're focused on the volume, on the opportunity. And it's not sexy. Like you said, you're not going to feel good after you do it. But Jamison Crowder is going to be good for fantasy football business in 2020.
Absolutely. I just still have the visions. I feel like it was so long ago that people forget, but there was that week 1. He had 17 targets and 14 receptions. I mean, if that's not a potential target hog, I don't know what is. That was 41.4% of his throws, Sam Darnold, on that Sunday. And there were a few other blowups mixed in there, a lot on the back of target and receptions. So, I mean, he was a wide receiver 1, 31% of the time. That was as much as Devonte Parker, who I was just referencing. So this guy had some humongous games and now faces, as you just referenced, so much less competition that now has less time to get ready and a rapport with this Sam Darnold in this offense. I'm with you. I mean, I think it's just some of he had some humongous duds as this whole offense did, but there's a real chance that he could just light it up and record 100 potential catches. I mean, it seems insane, but you get a 100 catch guy in like round 8 to 10, and that's insane to me. So I'm fully with you. I love the Jamison Crowder value that we're getting there. One guy I'm not sure how you view, because he's not going to be a target hog because he's behind literally the pinnacle of target hog in Michael Thomas. But Emmanuel Sanders goes to Sean Payton, that Drew Brees offense in New Orleans that has just for years and years lit up scoreboards. I mean, he himself referenced it as kind of similar to when he went to the Broncos when Peyton Manning was there and they were also just going bananas, and he had some insane seasons there. He's thinking he's going to do similar things to that. What do you think? Does Sanders have some sneaky upside there?
Like, if it was only Michael Thomas, that would be one thing. But we also have Alvin Kamara, who is going to be this offense's number 2 pass game option. So, and then Jared Cook was fantastic last year. So, like, Sanders' best case scenario is the number 3 option in a passing game that has trended more towards run the ball in recent years. Now, I know it's run the ball. It happens when you win. You don't win because you run the ball. I get it, everyone. But they have made a concerted effort over the years to both have Brees throw the ball less, and he's throwing downfield even less than he ever has. So Sanders is awesome. I mean, the fact he did what he did, 17 games last year because he didn't even get the bye week with the midseason trade, coming off the Achilles. He was a better ball from Jimmy Garoppolo away from scoring the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Right.
He's awesome. I just think he's going to be a better real-life addition than fantasy. I mean, just kind of looking at where he's falling in these drafts, I mean, I would just rather have the Giants wide receivers, Henry Ruggs, Anthony Miller, just guys that actually have a chance to be even the number 2 pass game option in their offense. Because right now, Cooks is on the outside looking in there. So I'm sorry, Sanders on the outside looking in there. So better real life addition than fantasy.
It could totally end up that way. I get it exactly what you're saying, especially when there's Jamison Crowder's available. That could be their number 1. So that does make total sense. And I don't know whether I should put much stock into this, as I sometimes do. But one thing that I love is that the last time he played the Saints was that insane, 49ers Saints shootout at Week 14 of the Superdome. He had 7 catches, 157 and a TD, scoring 34.1 points. And there's something about when like a team just gets dominated by a guy, and then you got the Saints who never really spend up at wide receiver. We haven't seen it in years, and they just go out. Nick Underhill, their beat reporter there, says it's just such a perfect marriage that the team that never spends on their wide receivers had to go out and get this guy because he plays the intermediate range so well that I just wouldn't be shocked if we do get 1,000 yards, and maybe he does. Kamara is such a different role as well, but maybe all of them blow up and we just get one of those wild Drew Brees seasons where he had 5,000 yards and 40 TDs like it was clockwork for so many years. I doubt we get it. I know we talked about it last week that's probably unlikely, but ultimately I would not be shocked at all to see 1,000 yards and maybe 6 to 8 TDs out of Sanders. Just another guy I think that has that unsexy type of upside for your auction drafts. Again, pay $60 for 3 different running backs, pay 180 total, and then just pick off whatever these wide receivers are falling for cheap. That's going to be totally my game for any people out there that do. Did you do any auction drafts, Ian, or not really?
Not really, but I'm curious about him. I like that strategy you got going on there. Because, yeah, I mean, it's not like if you're starting Manny Sanders in a decent enough matchup, you're not going to feel bad about it by any means. I think he'll be a popular DFS target throughout the season when he's underpriced a little bit. But, it's just comparing him to who's there. But, auction, he can go under the radar for sure.
Absolutely. And then one of the last couple cores that I have at least written down as risers, at least some of this core, so I'm intrigued to see what you think of it. But I like the Panthers' moves a lot. You got Teddy Bridgewater, obviously better than Kyle Allen. There's not a quarterback that wouldn't have been better than Kyle Allen as addition, but I really like what Bridgewater could do in this offense, as we talked about last time. And I love the Joe Brady move, as we raved about last time too. And then you get Robbie Anderson tossed in, so it's like, is he going to become a nuisance to these guys? Or is he going to be more of a field stretcher? So how do you see the Panthers wide receiver core shaking out between DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, and Robbie Anderson?
So initially when the Robbie trade happened, I was just like, all right, great. How him and Curtis are going to split the number 3 role and kind of, because it's McCaffrey 1, assuming DJ Moore 2, and then one of these guys 3. That's probably the range. But the thing is, like, everyone's just so bummed about missing in this. I mean, Curtis Samuel wasn't even that bad last year. He just wasn't nearly as good as DJ. But I think the potential for Curtis to become this kind of target hog, low ADOT slot guy in this offense can't be, we got to consider it because it is there. Robbie is probably going to be there to be the clear-out guy. That's what he's really been throughout his career. The money he got, I don't think is reflective of a true number 1 guy. Right. They already have enough dudes there, so – I'm up on Curtis as long as he's going in the wide receiver 50 range. Again, it's like just take a good player at that point. I mean, there's just so many more wide receivers you can talk yourself into than the running back position. So, yeah, taking guys like Manny Sanders, Curtis Samuel late that are talented, are in potentially productive passing offenses, I think is the move. DJ Moore is the one guy in this offense that I just think he's being priced a little too high towards his ceiling. I mean, Teddy is definitely an upgrade over Kyle Allen, as you said, in anything. But at the same time, it's now a new target share. It's now a new offense. And, DJ's the man. But I also think Curtis is the man. So is CMC. So, all 3 of those guys had over 100 targets last year. We just need to consider that maybe DJ ends up kind of being on the lower end of that spectrum this year.
I see totally what you're saying there. And it makes sense because there is a world where Curtis Samuel ends up outperforming him, which is it seems insane. I don't think it happens because I am a huge DJ Moore fan as well. But the difference really might not be nearly the 3rd round price tag of DJ Moore versus I got Curtis Samuel. I've just been doing some mock drafts, messing around with all the time we have off here. I got Curtis Samuel in the last round of the 12-team mock draft the other day. And that was when people drafted kickers and stuff. He's just sitting out there still. And the gap is not nearly as wide as I think people are viewing it right now, especially with Joe Brady, his whole philosophy, applying pressure, quote, getting your speed and space, making defenders defend every single blade of grass, and letting your players do what they do best. I think it's going to be the first time we see, you got Anderson 4.34, Moore 4.42, Samuel 4.31, and the slowest of them all, McCaffrey 4.48. What a bum. But no, that offense is going to, I think, really take off. They're going to be in tons of shootouts, and I think Samuel might be the best properly utilized he's ever been. And Brady also raved about how he loves to move his guys all over the place. They don't teach him just a X or a Y. They love interchanging everybody. That's what made them so dangerous at LSU. And all these guys have that versatility, especially Moore and Samuel. I love the fit, and I really think Teddy can deliver the mail. So I'm totally excited for this offense. In the last couple I got here, Calvin Ridley and Hayden Hurst. It's the most vacated target share in the league right now, with Austin Hooper leaving, Sanu gone, and a lot of people are now labeling Ridley kind of that next Chris Godwin, right? An explosive aerial attack that has tons of volume, released to the now number 2, who's just as talented, if maybe not as talented as Julio, but he's Ridley in my eyes is unbelievable. Are you buying the hype? Some people were not buying the Godwin hype last year, and they clearly didn't pay out. What do you think of Ridley though? Is the hype warranted?
Let me see. I'm doing the search now because I want the record to show on January 22nd, 2020. I said 2020 Calvin Ridley will be 2019 Chris Godwin.
Yes, I guess you're on board.
I was the pioneer of this. Of course I'm on board.
I love
this guy, Calvin Ridley, he's only had 8 career games with at least 8 targets. The dude has scored in every single one of those games except one. He's had 5 catches in every game and 80-plus yards every game. I mean, it's just been a matter of not having enough opportunity. And it's not only Hooper gone. It's Mohamed Sanu who got traded midseason. It's Devonte Freeman who is now gone as well. I mean, this is, by all accounts, still a bad defense, but still a very prolific passing game. I mean, Matt Ryan's not going anywhere. He's going to put up yards. Julio's going to do his thing. And, like we're talking kind of like the whole Adam Thielen factor, like you worry about if these guys can operate on their own if they don't have their star next to them. We don't have to worry about that with Ridley. And we've already seen him produce these numbers before. I mean, just with the volume. So it matches up so perfectly with the Godwin hype. The only thing that could happen is an injury. And I mean, I understand Ridley hasn't been, the most 100% injury-free guy in the world. But again, if you're going through these prospects and the only thing that you can stop yourself and say, well, okay, I'm not going to draft this guy because he'll probably get hurt, just be careful because you're going to miss out on some values with that type of thing.
Absolutely. And those games you referenced to last year, the splits without Hooper were just insane. There's only 3 of them, but 8 catches, 143 a TD, 28.3 fantasy points. The wide receiver 3 that week, 685 TD, 22 points. The wide receiver 8 for 91, 17.1 for the wide receiver 17. I mean, ridiculous outputs. He would have, if that pace somehow continued, which is a stretch, but ultimately like somewhat near there, isn't ridiculous to think. It would have been 353 fantasy points on the season, which would have trailed only Michael Thomas. I know it's a small sample, but I didn't even know that stat, the stat that he scored in every single time he's seen at least 8 targets. And I do think except once.
But he had a 3 touchdown game in there, so take
yeah, exactly. So I mean, if that value the volume steadies out as I think all of us expect to, he could be that guy that we're looking at the end of round 1, early round 2, come 2021 drafts. I'm stoked for him. What do you think about Hayden Hurst? Is he a tight end sleeper in your eyes at all? Just because a lot of people love that role. We saw what Hooper was doing in it. We've never really seen Hurst get that like real true number 1 role, and it seems like there's no one there other than him at tight end. Do you think he can do anything in that position?
Yeah, I'm seeing Hurst kind of consensusly almost near 20 ranked, and I have him as a tight end 13. I mean,
nice.
When you look at the tight end position, I think you have Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz, Andrews, and I'd even put Evan Ingram kind of in that top 5 tier with the potential he has. But after that, you can almost miss me with all these guys until we get to like that 12 to 15 range, and then just pick off 2 of them, and hopefully one of them blows up, because there's the same amount of kind of questions facing these talented tight end 2s as there are the kind of lower end tight end 1s. I mean, why pay up for Jared Cook and just hope he kind of gets the volume when you can go down to someone like Hurst that could feasibly put on an Austin Hooper-like season? I mean, look, the Falcons did not go into games last year looking to feature Hooper over Ridley and Julio. That happened when their awful team would get down multiple scores and then Hooper would catch all these checkdowns. I mean, it was kind of infuriating to watch if you didn't have Hooper on your fantasy squads. But we saw it happen. It could happen again. Like you said, Hurst has no competition for the role. I think he's a great target as his current tight end 2 valuation.
Absolutely. And ultimately, they probably didn't go in saying we want to pepper, Hooper the way we did. But Cutter did, during his time with Tampa Bay, he said, I'm the first to admit I like tight ends. And we saw it. Obviously, last year, Hooper was the tight end 1 before going down, better than Travis Kelce, better than George Kittle before his week 10 injury. 75 balls, 787 and 6 TDs. 3rd in points per game, but again, number 1 before the injury. And then you saw Cameron Brate and Howard combine for 11 and 12 TDs and 17 and 18, so the red zone role is there. And we kind of saw, instead of it getting divided up into 2 people, it just funneled right to Hooper, and I don't really see anyone else in the way for Hurst to see a ton of that. And we saw Tony Gonzalez. I mean, if you keep going back and back in Cutter's history, it's not, to me, he really does love tight ends when he says he does. 120 targets in back-to-back seasons for Tony Gonzalez. Mercedes Lewis had 10 TDs back in Jacksonville in 700 yards. So there's a rich, deep history of tight end usage. So I'm with you. He's actually exactly at tight end 13 for me as well. And one of my favorite, second or even top tight ends to target if I punt the position like that. So I'm all about it. And the last couple guys, I don't know if you want to go on about either of these, but they did have shakeups at the QB position, so I want to at least kind of hear what you think, if it's an upgrade or downgrade. And that's both Allen Robinson and then T.Y. Hilton, who will be catching passes from Nick Foles and Phillip Rivers, obviously, respectively. I just also want to put this on here to admit, over the summer, I kind of came at you for being too high on Allen Robinson, and I was definitely wrong on that one because he lit it up. He was much better than I expected, so I wanted to give you a shout out for that one. I was way too down on Allen Robinson. The guy can still ball. What do you think, though, of Allen Robinson and T.Y. Hilton this year? I mean, obviously they're two completely different players, but you targeting either of them?
I'm sure you were just down on the Trubisky hype train.
Exactly.
Which obviously did not. So, yeah, but I'm backing on A-Rob. The guy just had the third most targets in the entire NFL last season, and he now it's like we said, with Teddy over Kyle Allen. It's a quarterback upgrade. So is this. The only guys A-Rob has caught balls from in his college and NFL career have been Matt McGloin, Christian Hackenberg, Blake Bortles, Chad Henne, Chase Daniel, and Mitch Trubisky. So, yes, Nick Foles is the best quarterback of Allen Robinson who's going to play with. And I would also add, this is good news for Anthony Miller because, look, Taylor Gabriel's gone. Anthony Miller's like the rising, he's like, a poor man's Calvin Ridley this year. He's been in a crowded offense. He's produced. He just hasn't had the consistent, week-to-week opportunity. But he had 7 touchdowns playing through a bum shoulder as a rookie. He was a PPR wide receiver 8 in weeks 11 through 15 last year. I know we're kind of – you can pick these certain game splits and kind of make your narrative. I get all that. But all I'm trying to say is the dude has played at a high level in the NFL for stretches. Yeah. Now he's going to get every chance to be that wide receiver too. So I'm in on Chicago. I'm less than on T.Y. Hilton just because we have now 36 games of him without Andrew Luck. He scored 11.6 points per reception in those games. With Andrew Luck, he's all the way up at 15.5. So, look, T.Y. is the man, but he's aging. I think we'd agree. He's never exactly been a guy that's just. I don't know how gracefully he's going to age necessarily. He's used to running away from dudes. He's never been overly physical, and now he's starting to get banged up after that really wasn't an issue for the first part of his career. It's just a lot of questions. He's not egregiously overpriced. He's kind of going as like a mid-range wide receiver 20, so maybe he can still get it done. They only adding Pittman to that kind of wide receiver carousel they got going on there. Hilton should be the number 1 again in Indy, so for that I think he has the potential. But I don't know, man. It's just expecting Rivers to go there and kind of be that same offense. I'm buying A-Rob way over Hilton, that's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm hoping to redeem myself and get some more A-Rob, especially about some of what you were just citing there. I'm glad you threw out Anthony Miller because I completely forgot to include him on this list, and he's absolutely a riser with the best quarterback he's ever going to play with as well here. Hilton, I'm with you too. 43% bust rate even with Andrew Luck a couple seasons ago there, so it was still that boomer bust nature. Yeah, he was the wide receiver 17.1 points per game with Luck. But that's also Andrew Luck, and that's a much better deep ball thrower than what Phillip Rivers is at this stage of his career. That ball was fluttering last year. I get that they just said Nick Sirianni, we're going to run through him. He's still the focal point of our passing attack. And I was pretty impressed with how Reich kind of forced him to use a little bit more of his yards after the catch ability with a lot more quick hitters. I'm with you, though. This is the type of game that it does not age well. And suddenly, if he's not taking those slants 80 yards to the house, you're not getting those big booms anymore because he's not outrunning the defense, and Hilton just loses everything that makes him so special. So when that cliff hits, it's going to be an ugly one. It could be this year. It might be a year in advance, but I'd rather at least take the shot on these young, fresh bucks that we've already talked about, the DKs, the McLaurins. Give me all that all day, even with a QB upgrade for Hilton. I'm not in on him either, so I like that. Let's get to the fallers now. Who do you consider the biggest either wide receiver or tight end faller of this offseason?
The whole Stefon Diggs situation didn't exactly help. Josh Allen, I love the guy. I think he's, okay, taking Mahomes and Lamar Jackson's, that's fine. But he is a top 5 most entertaining quarterback in this league. But just throwing the ball, he's not there yet. And he took really big strides in almost everything from his rookie year to his second year, going to a third year with Diggs, with a better offensive line. There's a scenario where he plays better, but he just has a long way to go to even get to above average. He was a bottom 5 QB pretty much every deep ball stat last year except for, throwing the ball downfield a lot, which he does. So he's fun to watch. He makes defenses account for every square inch of that field because you never know what the guy's going to do. it's just, what is this going to mean for Stefon Diggs? John Brown was able to be the PPR wide receiver 20 last year. I think we'd all agree Diggs is better than Brown, but the problem is, like, is there going to be more volume necessarily?
Yeah.
Like he was already not used that much, and he was used in a way more efficient manner in Minnesota. I don't think anything like 150 targets is coming. If he can get in the 120, 130 range, okay, he can do something with it. But John Brown's good. Cole Beasley's good. Rising second-year tight end Dawson Knox is good. I mean, I'm just not convinced they're going to build this entire passing game around Diggs. And there's just a whole lot of questions. Now, I guess you can point to the Hopkins and say, why is Hopkins so much higher than Diggs if, we kind of have similar volume concerns? And, and that's why Diggs being priced as low as he is, I'm not saying he's a stay away, but I just think him going in that kind of wide receiver 25 range is warranted for the time being.
Yeah, he's the guy I had written down as my biggest faller, too. To just illustrate the stats that you were mentioning there with the deep balls, Josh Allen 6 for 50, 12% completion rate on throws over 30 yards in the air, 3 TDs and 3 interceptions on those throws, whereas Kirk Cousins was 10th last year in deep completion percentage with 44.3%, 119.7 deep passer rating, was 3rd in the league, whereas Allen ranked 23rd and 20th out of 24 QBs in each of those respective categories. So definitely a huge downgrade. Now, how much of that was Diggs being so good at tracking the ball and shaking free of defenders? Or maybe that will help close that gap. It certainly will help. But how much of it is just Cousins as a better quarterback, a better deep thrower than him? Because Diggs did rely on, it was 16 receptions, 16 deep ball receptions, led the league in deep yardage. All 6 of his TDs were deep throws. That was 54.5% of his production came on 16 deep receptions. If those balls are getting sailed over his head because Cousins is just that much better than Allen, it could be a much uglier, and never mind the diva concerns, right? Like if he's starting to struggle and it's not going as well, we've already seen him go on tirade on the Twitter. So who knows exactly what's going to happen there, but it's way too many question marks for me to consider. So I'm with you. He's a guy I have fallen completely off of. What about Michael Gallup? We talked about last week. Dak is the no-brainer QB3 because of the CeeDee Lamb edition, but it definitely does shake up that wide receiver core. Do you think Gallup or is it Cooper? Do you think either of them take a big hit? How's that going to shake out this year, in your opinion?
I think they're both. I mean, they're all fine. I mean, I get going lower. Amari Cooper is being still priced as kind of like the outright wide receiver 1 in the offense. In the last 8 weeks of the year, I think a lot of this had to do with Cooper having just one of the most tough cornerback kind of shadow schedules you'll ever see with Gilmore, Slay, Ramsey, all these guys coming back to back to back. But Prescott was able to enable each of Cooper, Gallup, and Randall Cobb to like wide receiver 2 production pretty much. And, I think we could all agree CeeDee Lamb is probably better than Randall Cobb at this point. No disrespect to Cobb, but come on, you draft a guy at number 17. That's what you're hoping. And just adding those guys, we talk about the Falcons having all the open targets. The Cowboys are number 2 in available targets because Witten and Cobb, who both had, I believe, exactly 83 targets last season, they're gone. So, we're going to see Jarman, we're going to see Zeke eating that target share. But this is we talked about, like the Dolphins not being a Chiefs offense. The Cowboys are pretty close to being a Chiefs offense.
Yeah.
I mean, this was one of 11 teams in the Super Bowl era to average 6.5 yards per play last season. Losing Travis Frederick sucks, but I think we talked about this in the last pod. Like, they have a 16-game starter in Joe Looney from 2018. Yeah. They've drafted high round guys in 3rd and 4th round last 2 years to try to address that hole. So assuming the O-line is still at the very least an above average unit, there's more than enough firepower for this passing game to have more than a couple guys. And yeah, Gallup, he's got to contend with CeeDee Lamb, but I mean, Gallup was contending with Amari Cooper for the wide receiver 1 spot last season. So no, I'm not too concerned with Gallup.
Interesting take there. Yeah. So are you concerned with Cooper then, or not even really any of them? You'd buy anyone at the price they're going at?
I would say Cooper is more concerned. I just find myself with these, again, like there's the big 5 wide receivers. If, the top 7 running backs are gone, you're kind of at the turn. Maybe you got to take your chance on one of these kind of middle wide receivers, your Adam Thielens or Allen Robinson's the world. But man, it's just more. I've been doing it like, best ball drafts every single week and stuff. And just taking a chance on these wide receivers that you have ranked like 10 through 20. I just don't see a massive teardrop between, the 10 through 20 and the 21 through 30 wide receivers.
Right.
The same way there is for running backs. So, Cooper is a great guy to have on your team, but if it's between Cooper and a team's, Austin Eckler or Miles Sanders type guy, give me the running back.
I'm fully with you. I'm going running back in almost every mock I've done so far, and I've loved my teams every single time. We've talked about a lot of these guys, wide receivers up to 30. There's still a ton of talent, and then even beyond them, like we're finding those Crowders and some of these potential target hogs that often slip outside of there too. So it is such a deep position this year. I'm all with you there. Two of the guys that are definitely going to be going towards the top of the position that we're talking about in that same range is the Ecklers, the Kenyon Drakes. That's the Bucs wide receivers, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Obviously, they've got a new quarterback in town and Tom Brady. What do you think? I mean, it's got to be a better real-life edition than Jameis Winston, but that guy also just hucked the ball whenever and whenever he could. So ultimately, and also you get Gronk in the fold. Do you consider those guys fantasy losers? Is there one you'd be targeting over the others? What do you think of the Bucs guys?
Right now, I have Godwin a little bit ahead. I'm kind of buying into the slot narrative going on there. And I mean, look, Evans should be future Hall of Famer if he keeps this up. And I mean, Godwin is right there seemingly as talented as well. So, maybe Evans finds a way to keep doing it. But yeah, I'm with you, man. Like, I don't, I think if we had to ask people, like, do you think both Godwin and Evans will finish as wide receiver ones again? Most people would say no. Yeah, we're looking at these rankings, and almost every rankings, including mine, probably. I might have Evans like 13 or 14, but we still have both these guys ranked super high. And yeah, I mean, Brady obviously better real life QB than Jameis, but as you said, Brady's checking that ball down the open running back or sailing it out of bounds. Jameis is throwing that same ball to a double covered Mike Evans downfield, hoping for the best. So it's just kind of an issue, man, with projecting these new quarterbacks to go anywhere. So again, and it just comes down to value. Godwin's awesome. Evans awesome. Gronk's awesome. They're all being priced already as wide receiver ones and tight end ones. Like, no, right. I'm probably going to be out on these guys. There's nothing wrong with the players, and maybe they will go on the ball out. But whenever we have volume concerns with a new QB under center or anything, take an extra long look before you take that over someone more proven.
Yeah, I'm with you on that slot narrative too. I value Godwin definitely higher than Evans, which means Evans is going to become the Randy Moss and have like 20 touchdowns this year for Brady.
Exactly.
But I love just the higher percentage throws. I mean, a bigger, stronger, better Edelman. Like it could end up being if either of these guys are going to explode, to me, it's probably going to be Godwin. And I'm with you that I don't know if he can because of all the targets he has to compete with now. So speaking of slot guys, though, the guy that Brady's leaving behind now to most likely Jarrett Stidham is going to be Julian Edelman now. Is that going to be a huge downgrade? I mean, the guy was the wide receiver 7 last year in PPR leagues. I've got some stats on the targets between the Pats slot receivers since Welker and Edelman eras began there, and it's pretty crazy. So how much of it in your eyes was Brady versus the system, and how big of a fall, in your opinion, does Edelman take in the rankings with his guy Tom gone now?
Yeah, it's definitely problematic, man. I mean, he's already kind of taken such a hit. Like, he's just kind of going that Stefon Diggs, like 25 to wide receiver 30 range, where okay, at that price, I don't mind chasing the upside, because I don't think he's going to like Diggs and Edelman, they aren't going to dud next year. It's just a question of if they're going to be able to be that true wide receiver one that we know they're capable of being. So it's not the end of the world to go back to the guy, but with so much unknown, it's just like, why not wonder if Mohamed Sanu could lead this offense? They just gave up a second-round pick for him. N'Keal Harry, they just took in the first round. Both those guys are going, outside the top 50 wide receivers. So probably when it comes down to it, I'll take the other guy, not Edelman, because I do think there's a big chance for a target share and the offense in general to go down. But, hey, they aren't tanking. I mean, that's Vegas. The Patriots' win total is set at 9 wins. Bill Belichick is not tanking. So they're going to put up production somewhere. When there is a mystery, I tend to say, okay, take the cheaper guy, if we're not sure what's going on. But with Edelman where he is, he's a faller for sure, but he's fallen. So I don't mind taking him at this lower price point.
The one thing that might not be a mystery either, too, is those numbers I was referencing, too, for the slot wide receivers. Now, again, who knows if it's going to be a different offense. The Patriots do craft the offense around their quarterback and their talent more than anybody else we've ever seen. Brissett comes in for a game and it becomes a Pop Warner, like, wing T type of offense. So, I mean, they're going to adjust the offense to sit him, who, by all accounts, from the New England area, they're saying is more of the jump ball, like, precision thrower, lets his guys do the play. So that would seem to favor N'Keal, seem to favor a big body like Sanu as well. If not, though, I mean, if they do keep what's in place, the slot wide receivers have been on pace for 140 plus targets and 24% market share in all 12 of the last seasons. I mean, that doesn't mean they've hit 140 targets because Edelman's gotten injured here and there. But between Welker and Edelman, two good talents, yes, but that offense has definitely funneled through there. And in fact, they've been the top 12 PPR in points per game in 9 of those 12 seasons out of the slot for New England. So that's 75% hit rate, and he's being drafted as the wide receiver 34 right now. To me, I just see a big gap between the history there, and I get why the cliff could hit. But if I can get that type of production and volume in round 8 and 9 right now, I'm going to take a flyer on it and make sure that he's on the squad. Maybe he becomes that guy still. Would be an insane value for me. What about Austin Hooper? We raved about Hayden Hurst because that role is so nice over in Atlanta with Dirk Cutter peppering the tight end and just, Matt Ryan. Now Hooper goes to a much more crowded, probably a more run-heavy offense over there with the Browns. I personally, I'm not going to own Hooper anywhere, but what are your thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing him go off the board sometimes. It's like tight end 6 through 8 range. And like I was saying before, I mean, Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, Ertz, Ingram, if I don't get one of those guys, I'm just going to let people overspend on tight ends for the next few rounds before I need to. Because, I mean, why should we expect Hooper, who is, by all accounts, easily going to be a number 3 pass game option in this offense? Why should he be that much far ahead of Gesicki or Hawkinson or Johnny Smith or Herndon or Jarwin or Ian Thomas, like Jay Sternberger? There's 20 plus draftable tight ends this year. It's good, but remember, there's only one. Most leagues you have one tight end on your team. Like, it's okay. You don't need to gamble on Hooper and hope he provides this like low end tight end 1 value, unless Baker is gonna just come back with a vengeance and throw for 4,500 yards and 40 touchdowns. Hooper's gonna need to get there with like scoring efficiency at a low number of targets. Because again, it's not like he was this all-world receiving tight end that just dominated target share because he was that good. I mean, go to Pro Football Reference, pull up his splits, and look at how much of it comes when they're in the game versus when they're trailing by multiple scores. It's bad. And it's nothing against Hooper. He can't control when the ball gets thrown to him, but he's just a much better real-life tight end than he is fantasy.
Really interesting stats there. Yeah, I'm with you. There's just no reason to jump on him. I'm intrigued because you keep listing Evan Ingram with that group of 6 tight ends, and I'm with you. I think he's one of the most athletic freaks. I just wish we could get a fully healthy season. But one thing I love, and I don't have him on the list as talking points, but I wrote about this the other day. Jason Garrett with Jason Witten, not nearly the athlete that Evan Ingram is, saw 141, 121, 124, 128, 117, and 147 targets through his 6 seasons with Jason Garrett. I mean, that is some serious volume. That's when Garrett was calling the plays, and obviously they've transitioned to other guys between that. But from 2007 to 2012, I mean, he was averaging right around 130 targets at the tight end position. So if Ingram stays healthy, I love that you keep him with those other names because I think a lot of people are starting to view him more in that Hooper range, and I'm with you. Like, he's definitely a step above those guys. So I'm glad you keep shouting him out. One other pass core, there's 2 others that are going to have new kind of looks here. One of them, and you've been writing about this guy on Twitter a bit, and we talked about him last week. That's the Bengals with Joe Burrow and the upside he can now bring to this. You have A.J. Green back. You have T. Higgins now added. And you have Tyler Boyd, who's been balling out these last couple of years, plus Auden Tate, who really lit it up last year. So how does this all shake out? And which, if any, of these guys are you targeting?
It's so crowded, man. Someone even corrected me and was like, "Oh, we got Alex Erickson still there too." So it's
yes, of course.
Yeah, obviously Mixon and Gio are good enough receivers. They're going to get theirs as well. It's tough, but hey, this is kind of like the Edelman thing. I mean, would I want to draft AJ Green as the wide receiver 1 that we know he can be? No, But when the guy's being priced as like a mid-tier wide receiver 3, okay, then I'm down to gamble on this because, more and more with Burrow, it's like the things we have against him are that he transferred from Ohio State once upon a time. And it's like, okay, well, he just went on to, tougher schedule at LSU, just shatter every record that Haskins was already setting. So whatever. And he's older, which like, okay, if he was a raw Josh Allen type prospect, maybe we were a little more concerned about the age. But when the guy was just past his, pro style offense with the most flying colors maybe we've ever seen in a single season, I think we can say that, okay, this offense could be pretty good sooner rather than later. So, yeah, man, it's a kind of a mess. But again, there's just upside everywhere. And none of these guys are exactly costing all that much right now. I mean, look, they apparently want T. Higgins to be in 3 wide receiver sets right away. I mean, a John Ross trade has been floated out there. Higgins feasibly, if he, forms connections early, it wouldn't be shocking to me if he flirts with triple-digit targets. I think Tyler Boyd's the one guy that I just never quite gotten behind. I think he's the clear wide receiver 2 when Green's healthy, and they're priced really close together. Even if Green is somehow out again, which I don't think we need to expect, I could see Higgins and, maybe even Boyd, Higgins or Ross or maybe even Tate fighting with Boyd for that role. So I think Green's spot in the offense is much more secure than Boyd's, what I'm trying to say.
Really interesting there too, yeah. And I think you might have even been the one that tweeted it the other day. That was like the Bengals could become, legit good sooner rather than later. And it might have been Thorman.
The offense.
What's that? Sorry.
I was saying the offense.
Oh, yes, of course.
Trash.
Right.
I think it's
Which I don't. Who cares about defense? I'm not worried about defense at all. But Pat Thorman brought up a good point about how their pace of play under Taylor, when they had just Andy Dalton at QB and no AJ Green, was still 9th in the league, and that they did have some really encouraging offensive developments that I think a lot of people are overlooking because the point total wasn't great, but we saw some intriguing play calling trends. So if this Taylor offense, for those that don't know, hailing from that McVay offense that used to light it up, they've got the weaponry. They hopefully have that QB to engineer it all. So I could see them taking a really big leap as a unit. And AJ Green could, as you said, price as a wide receiver 3. We've seen this guy top 5 for so many years. Wouldn't shock me at all to see that happen either. The last core I want to describe or look at with you is the Chargers here with Tyrod Taylor and maybe Justin Herbert taking over at some point too. Keenan Allen was the wide receiver 6 last year and is now going in round 4 and sometimes even falling out of there, which blows my mind. But is Tyrod that much of a downgrade, or how do you see this offense kind of shaking out with him?
I don't think Tyrod's a downgrade. It's just a situation where are we positive? And some people will say, yes, we are positive about this, but I'm not positive that Keenan is like just locked in as the Chargers' number 1 pass game option. I mean, Mike Williams, if he leads the league and if he leads the team in targets, I wouldn't be shocked. Hunter Henry's amazing. Eckler's obviously awesome. So it is a significant downgrade. We've seen what he can do with Rivers. Keenan's good enough to overcome that. But again, Keenan doesn't have that same Edelman, AJ Green downgrade, even the Stefon Diggs value. Like Keenan, even if he maybe in some drafts he is falling late. Again, if the guy slides, then okay, by all means. But when he's still being priced in that wide receiver 10 to 20 range, I'm just a little hesitant in pulling the trigger there. There's a lot of questions. Again, when it's 50-50 with these earlier wide receivers, give me the running back. I know this to get the touches because I think the Tyrod hate is a little much. I mean, the guy was fine in Buffalo, and even though he didn't have any super high-end wide receivers emerge, I mean, Sammy Watkins, Robert Woods, those guys did do some good things for stretches. So Keenan's the man. I'm concerned about it. I don't think his ADP has dropped enough for me to go in on that yet. And so, just give me Mike Williams 20 wide receiver spots later.
I've just, again, overall strategy that you keep highlighting is buying the guy at the price where there's actual upside baked into it. Whereas you're right, like Keenan doesn't have this huge ceiling anymore. With Tyrod, who's never cleared over 3,100 passing yards, he's never had more than 20 TDs. So he's a good quarterback. He's solid, but you're right. Like, and they might. There's a lot of this talk about them becoming more pistol-based and just featuring 2 running backs at the same time, and I could see them getting really creative and great overall on offense with that. But we saw Lamar Jackson leading the league in terms of the overall offensive output, but still there was not a clear-cut, dependable fantasy wide receiver there at all. Maybe it becomes a situation like that. So yeah, I'm with you. It's not a guy I'm definitely not going on my way to avoid, but certainly not going out of my way to get on my team either. Is there anybody we missed? I mean, that's all I have written down for talking points. I know we hit a ton of guys here. Is there any other guys that you think are worth shouting out here at the pass catcher positions?
The only other one I'd add is that, I mean, the disparity between Juju Smith-Schuster and Deontay Johnson right now is wild. I would say Deontay is one of my favorite later round guys right now. I mean, he's not even late rounds, but, he's going like as a wide receiver 40 almost. And don't forget, in 2018, not only Big Ben cleared 5K yards, Juju and AB were number 3 and number 4 in targets. Wow. So, I mean, the number 2 wide receiver in Pittsburgh we've seen can be a number 1 fantasy wide receivers. So, just as, we're expecting Ridley and Julio to both, flirt with that wide receiver 1 borderline, sneakily, I think Juju and Deontay could do that same thing.
Does Claypool, worry you at all for Deontay's volume, or what do you think of him?
I think I like Claypool. I think he's just there for James Washington's job.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Ian, thanks so much for joining us. Why don't you remind our listeners where they can find you and connect?
Yes, sir. Find me on Twitter at iHartitz, IHARTITZ. I try to have an article up a day, and then I'm on a Tuesday edition of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. Thanks for having me on, man. This was fun.
Always a blast talking ball with you. And the series you're doing right now is awesome. You're doing like the questions around each team. So if any of our listeners have not checked out his work on Rotoworld, it is fantastic. Thanks so much again, Ian. We're going to be back with Backfields early next week. So thanks so much for tuning in. And Wolfpack, we are out.